Hello everyone, 76 Patriot here, and for today's video I want to do my new presidential prediction. And this of course will be Trump v. Harris. And a lot of this is going to be kind of my own opinions and sentiments, obviously, because there hasn't been a ton of polling on a lot of these states due to this being, a recent decision, obviously. So without further ado, let's start though by filling out these safe Democratic states. Get those out of the way, and of course we got the left coast. Not a lot of surprises here. I think Hawaii, Colorado, unfortunately. Some of these states, really, no matter who with the Democrat nominee at the top of the ticket, it's just not going to matter. They're still going safe blue at the end of the day. And a couple of these could theoretically be brought into question, if Harris collapses in the same way that Biden kind of did. New York, New Jersey, we were talking about those kind of earlier. Based on some polling, could they be a bit closer than expected? We'll have to see. At the moment, I'm just going to leave them again safe blue because it's so early in the game here. But regardless, I believe that's it for the safe Democratic states. So let's fill out these safe Republican states, of which there are quite a few. Of course, we got the Mountain West here. A lot of these kind of plains states. Let's fill them all out. And a lot of these, of course, again, no matter who the Democrat at the top of the ticket is, they'll be going solid Republican, just due to their nature, which is great. And we got Nebraska's large. Maine's second, I think, is going to be won by a safe margin this time around, just due to Trump doing really well with that kind of demographic, that rural, white working class voter, non-educated voter. And also Iowa and Ohio, these are two that have been kind of brought into the kind of safe Republican coalition, if you will, at this point. And I just don't really see a scenario in which Trump loses them, certainly not by less than he won them last time, which was about 8 points. And would totally envision probably about 10 points a Trump win, maybe 11, who knows. And that, I believe that's it for the safe. We got Alaska. Almost forgot about Alaska. And I think that's it for the safe Republican states. So now we're down to the likely category. Likely, so there's only a couple likely states, and there's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think there are any likely Democrat states. So let's actually move on to the likely Republican states, of which there are several. There are Texas. Texas is a state that has been seeing some Democratic favorable trends over the past several election cycles. This time around, I think Trump is probably going to take the state by about maybe 8 points, maybe 9. I could even see more. Harris is not somebody in the scant polling that we have seen. She doesn't appear to be doing well with Hispanics. She certainly didn't do well with them when she ran for Senate in California, which was, the demographic she really should have done well with as a person of color. Trump is doing well. He's making great gains with Hispanics, particularly in Texas. Same thing in Florida. These are states, again, depending on what happens, I could see Trump winning them by a safe margin. Florida, I'd probably say by around 6, maybe 7 at this point, due to just how red it's gotten. So that brings us to the leaner category. So, of course, we have several Democratic-leaning states. And some of these are honestly ones that, again, and I know I keep saying this, but really, guys, it is so early in, kind of this point in the race between Trump and Harris, assuming she is the Democrat nominee, that it's really hard to tell. So some of this is just kind of supposition and assuming that she'll do about as bad as Biden in some states, maybe slightly better in others. But we'll start off with New Mexico. New Mexico is a state where it's kind of a mixed bag for Republicans. We've seen some polling. Republicans, first of all, have not done particularly well in the state in recent years. However, we have seen some polling. I believe there's a couple polls like a month ago or so that showed Trump down by like 2 points to Biden. We'll see if that kind of momentum stays the same. I could totally see like Harris probably taking the state by about 3 to 4 at the end of the day. She could do more. particularly with educated voters in the large urban areas. And then we have the state of New Hampshire. This is one, again, I'm just not entirely sure about. We've seen some positive polling for President Trump in the past. I could see, again, for whatever reason, I just could envision Kamala Harris doing fairly well with some of the educated voters. There's not a lot of New Hampshire. It's probably one of the most white states in the entire union. So I don't think minority demographics are going to play a big role in the state there. I'd probably see her taking it by, again, about 3 points at the end of the day, but we'll have to see what happens. And I believe we got one more. It's actually a district. Actually, we got a couple more. But Nebraska is second. The infamous Nebraska is second. This is one I could personally, probably out of honestly any state or district, I could see Kamala Harris doing fairly well in. It's kind of right up her alley, if you will. It's urban. There's a lot of neocons. There's a lot of your kind of very liberal Republicans. You got Don Bacon, a very liberal Republican, as your representative. They voted for Biden back in 2020. I would totally not be shocked if on election night Trump loses this by about 3 to 4 points. And that would be actually doing a slight uptick in his performance from last time. But again, at the end of the day, things could change. Really, we could be better. It's just there's so many unknowns at this point. And actually, I lied. There is one more state that is a Democrat leaner, and this is the state of Minnesota. And this is one of the only, actually, I think the only state where I actually downgraded it a notch for the Republicans. In my last presidential prediction video, Trump v. Biden, of course, I had Minnesota as tilt Democrat. And because at the time, I thought, it seems a reasonable thing to do. Polling was pretty close. And now I'm not entirely sure. I still think it's going to be a closer race than expected, probably about a 3-point race at the end of the day. But, I mean, we saw what happened in the Twin Cities area after 2020. I mean, we had crazy protests. Minneapolis was parts that were burned to the ground. And the state, that region basically propelled the state to a leftward lurch of about 6 points from 2016. So even after they saw all those horrible things going on, they still were A-okay with it. So I just don't see, those people coming crazy in droves to the Republican Party. And honestly, I think that Harris may do slightly better than Biden due to heavy black populations and minorities in those urban areas. And without kind of, protracting this discussion too long, let's move on to the leaning Republican states. And there is basically just one, I believe, that is the state of North Carolina, the state where actually I am from. This is a state that I don't think is going to change much. Whether it was Biden, whether it's Harris, I think Trump is on track based on not only polls and kind of voter registration metrics, and also kind of having a bit of my finger on the pulse of some state politics and talking with a lot of people. This is a state that Trump is on track, I believe at this point at least, to take home by probably the same margin he did in 2016, which is about 3 points, 3.5 points. And, I don't think that Harris is going to do, she's not particularly liked among the black community here, at least not maybe as she would be compared relative to other states, let's say. And it's interesting because this is one that Trump needs for kind of one of the 7 swing states, you could say, although I'd argue it's part of the Republican column at this point. And that is it for the leaning Republican states. So moving back to the tilt Democratic states, there is one on this list that is probably, if you're watching this, feel free to roast me in the comments. I'm just going to go a bit bullish on this one. State of Virginia, I'm probably going to have second thoughts about doing this. Probably might eat my words and be a bit embarrassed later on. But I am just feeling a bit bullish on Virginia for Trump. He had a lot of momentum with, when Biden was in the race. He actually is still very slightly leading in the RCP polling aggregate. And this is a state, again, probably honestly merits a lean Democrat rating, but I'm just going to put it as tilt because I'm not trying, I don't want to be a doomer all of a sudden now that Harris entered the race because I still think that Trump is doing really, really well in some of these places. And I don't think that a lot of these suburbanite kind of voters, maybe college educated voters, will go for Harris over Biden a bit more. But I just don't see a ton of these suburban, kind of independent, slightly liberal leaning voters are all of a sudden, now that Biden's out of the way, are going to curl over broken glass to come out by, you know, the tens of thousands for Harris. I could be wrong once again, and I'm probably going to regret this, but I'm going to put that as tilt for now. We'll see. At least I'm not as bullish as some people putting it as tilt or lean Republican, which I hope it is. And then we have Maine at large. This is a state, again, could possibly merit a lean Democrat rating, but Maine is trending slightly to the right. Again, it's a state where you could see Trump doing pretty well simply because of those kind of uneducated, well, I mean, Maine, there are a lot of some educated people, but it's not like a state like Colorado where everybody has a degree. Um, there's certain demographics in the state that Trump appeals to. Again, those uneducated, or lower educated, I should say, white kind of working class people. And this is a district that Trump narrowly lost in 2016, very narrowly, by just, I believe, a couple of points. It trended a bit to the left in 2020. He still lost it, but I believe it was like a likely margin. This is probably going to narrow up at the end of the day when all is said and done. And honestly, I would probably see Trump winning Maine at large before he would theoretically could win New Hampshire. And that's it for the tilt Democrat states. Let's move on to the tilt Republican states, which, surprise, surprise, is the last category. So probably implies all these are going to be in that category. I'll just spoil it for y'all. But let's start off with the state of Nevada in the Sun Belt. And this is one President Trump has been crushing it in all the polls with Biden in the race. He has been killing it with Hispanics. Even we just saw something huge, actually, I believe it was yesterday, the Nevada Culinary Union, which is basically a huge part of the propping up the Democratic machine in the state and basically mobilizing their base to come out and support Democrats. Basically, no, they didn't endorse Trump himself, but they endorsed heartily his, or the note, you could say the note tax on tips ideology, without even mentioning or implying anything about Trump. But they came out in favor of that. And so that's a big kind of symbolic move in the state that I hope tilts it in favor towards Trump. We can see Hispanics are, I would not be shocked if Trump did about 50-50 with Hispanics in the state. I would not be surprised. That might sound crazy. Same thing in Arizona. Arizona might be a bit of a heavier lift than Nevada, simply due to, you have to deal with Maricopa County, changing demographics. We can talk about election integrity too, is definitely a factor. Arizona has basically done jack squat in regardless, nada in regard to this problem, which is a shame. We'll see if enough people come out and hopefully overwhelm the polls in November. Arizona is a state that I could totally see Trump winning due to, it was the narrowest Democratic victory, second narrowest in 2020. Wisconsin, part of the Rust Belt, of course, a state that I think it was certainly the most favorable to Republicans demographically out of the Rust Belt trio, the big three. And I think it's the most vulnerable piece of the blue wall for sure. We had a Senator Ron Johnson reelected last in the midterms, so it's not unheard of that we get Republicans elected to office. The only thing is basically, can Trump really just amass a large vote shares in the rural kind of flyover parts of the state. And same story in Michigan. And I will say, if there is one swing state, one of the 6 or 7, that I could see, for whatever reason, Trump falls up short in, I don't think it's going to happen. But if there was, it would be the state of Michigan. Just because it's the hardest, it's the bluest of the 3 to win. I'm going to be real. We'll see if Arab voters play a role because there's a lot of them, a lot of Muslims in Michigan. If they we'll see. First, we'll have to see Harris's strategy on Israel, and if she kind of seems to be tiptoeing around that at the moment to kind of placate different parts of her base. We'll see if Arabs end up backing her or if they kind of shy away from her just like they were with Biden. And then we got Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a state that's probably the second easiest to win for Republicans in the Rust Belt, of the big three, rather. And basically, you got to ramp up your margins in the rurals, keep Democrat turnout and enthusiasm in Pittsburgh and Philly to a minimum. That's your recipe for a Republican win. So turnout cannot be sky high in Philly and some of these places like it was in 2020. Um, and I don't think Harris is a turnout machine. She might turn out some people, some minority voters, but I don't think she's a turnout machine like Obama. I think anybody who says that is kidding themselves. Same thing in Georgia. We have one last state in the Sun Belt, so I did a bit out of order there, you could say. Georgia is a state that honestly could probably merit lean Republican. I just don't want to be overtly optimistic and regret it. So I'm leaving it as tilt for now. I could see Trump take the state by like 2 points. Honestly, probably more at the end of the day. We'll see. But Georgia is a state that has been trending to the left over the last decade, and it was the single narrowest win by percentage for Biden in 2020. Kind of a surprise victory as well. Election integrity has been massively, sure, there could always be more done, absolutely, but it has been out of any of the swing states. Georgia is by far the most to have at least done something to try to prevent what happened in 2020. And I respect that. I think Trump is going to do pretty well in suburban Atlanta relative to 2020. I don't think he's going to get crushed in some of those counties again. And again, black turnout, we'll have to see. Some people are thinking that it could, massively ramp up and go to Harris. I'm not sure. So this is basically where we're at. We're going to end our prediction with Trump retaking the White House at 312 to 226 votes for Democrats. Again, I'm not sure how this is going to play out, and this really depends on how strong Kamala Harris is as a candidate. My gut instinct, I'm just going to talk for probably about 2 minutes on this and then wrap up because I don't want to elongate this too much. But my kind of final thoughts, as of what we're seeing right now, is that Harris is probably about just as weak a candidate as Biden, maybe a slight uptick better. As far as, maybe she could get some black women or some minorities to come out slightly stronger in some states. But I think the notion that she's just this electoral juggernaut is mistaken. She basically lost or did extremely poorly in all her past electoral races. She has very low approval rating for a Veep, I believe the lowest in modern history, certainly. And she's just not the strongest candidate, no matter how gleeful Dems might be at this moment. It's kind of a new shiny object, and I think it's going to wear off within a few weeks once the numbers the writing's on the wall and the polling starts coming out. Again, we'll have to see, but I don't think, we can't get complacent at all. We have to pretend like we're losing in order for Trump to get back in office. But I will say I think we need to dispel the notion that it's all over because, a terribly unlikable candidate suddenly entered the fray. So that's basically it for this one, guys. Again, it's such an evolving kind of dynamic situation we'll have to look at. But this is where I think at least a reasonable, hopefully, assumption of where it may stand right now is. That's it for this one, though, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.